I'm going to be telling you my favorite ETF for 2024 and why. There's a lot of facts and figures behind the reason why I want to be involved in this ETF in 2024. So hang about, it's one of my favorite ones and I'm going to be sure to let you know exactly why I'm interested in it. 2024 is set to be a big year within the markets and I want to break down 4 ETFs that I'm looking at and why I'm looking at them. So the first ETF that I want to explore is all around semiconductors. Now for some of you that don't know, semiconductors have been in huge demand, especially with what's going on around the world. Semiconductors are used within electronic devices across a vast amount of different sectors, ranging from military, healthcare, tech, communications, clean energy, the list really does go on. So with semiconductors affecting so many sectors and being in so much demand, with everything that's going on in the world, especially with all of the military struggles that we're having through Israel, Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, you name it, we're going to see a large demand, especially within that space for semiconductors. Again, within healthcare, what we've been going through with COVID and everything else, we're seeing a lot more demand for healthcare advances. So we're going to see that side of things. And obviously electronic devices, we're going to need semiconductors for any electronic device that we are looking for from an advancement perspective. And this all comes down to where we're going within the future. And we want to have a little bit of our portfolio exposed to semiconductors. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be looking at the ETF called iShares Semiconductor ETF. Now what's absolutely staggering when we look at this ETF, within 2023, the demand for this ETF was huge and so was the performance, with over a 66% gain on this ETF in 2023 alone. So what will this hold in store for 2024? This is going to see potentially big demand behind this ETF, and this is why we want to explore it a little bit further. So the iShares Semiconductor ETF is also known as SOX, S-O-X-X. So by owning this ETF, S-O-X-X, it will give you exposure to semiconductor companies that manufacture, design, and distribute semiconductors within the US. So one of the things to take note with this ETF especially is that if we look at 10 years performance here on the chart, you can see that if hypothetically you invested $10,000 10 years ago, that would equate to over $90,000 right now. So you can see the huge amount of growth on this, and especially over that last year with a 66% increase happening within 1 year. With semiconductor demand potentially on the rise within 2024, this is the first ETF that we should be paying attention to and looking out for. The second ETF that we're going to be exploring today is by the First Trust and Nasdaq Cybersecurity ETF, known as Cyber, C-I-B-R. As you may have guessed from the name, it is all about cybersecurity. You guys may have seen throughout the last couple of years that cybersecurity threats have been going through the roof massively, with the whole mix between China and the US especially. Throw a bit of North Korea and Russia in there and we can see why cybersecurity threats are on the rise and why there may be some demand behind this ETF. So as you probably guessed from the name of the ETF, the companies within this ETF as a basket are all focused on cybersecurity. So that will be from the designing, implementation of security protocols through multiple different devices such as laptop, mobile, and anything else you can really think of. They will also be focusing on network protection as well and making sure that the cybersecurity threats there are also low. And this is another area that we want to be looking at, is what is happening within the current environment. And as we know, there is a lot of tension between a lot of different nations right now, and cybersecurity threats are definitely on the rise. So although this chart may not have grown aggressively in comparison to the first ETF that we looked at, we can see here that actually if we invested $10,000 in 2016, that would be nearly $30,000 US right now, which is absolutely huge growth over that period of time. All right, maybe not as aggressive as our first ETF, but overall, let's have a look at what's happened within the last year alone. Within the last year alone, this ETF has increased by 39%, which is very, very alarming. But with everything that's been going on in the last year around the world and all of the tensions increasing, it's at no surprise that cybersecurity threats are at a high. So I think with overall looking at what's happening in 2024, I think cybersecurity threats are also going to increase, and I think this ETF would be a nice little bit of diversification across the markets. And obviously by owning an ETF, it's a basket of stocks within that ETF, and overall gives me that diversification that I need for exposure to cybersecurity threats. And I think, again, this is an ETF that you should look at, and it's definitely very, very interesting. Guys, come and join our $100,000 free trading competition. That's right, you get to put your skill set in the Forex markets to test over a 2-week period, and the winners are gonna walk away with $100,000 cash prize pool. That's right, it's really that simple. There is no cost. Click the link, get started, and I'll see you in the challenge. The third ETF that I would like to explore is the US Oil Equipment and Services ETF on iShares. Now, as you can imagine, it's not directly oil, but it's related to the equipment and services that surround oil. And that is a great area to invest in if you believe that oil is going to be increasing in demand over the next year. So why am I investing in the oil equipment and services rather than oil directly? Well, with prices in oil, especially around conflict and the tension that's going on in the world, there could be some shocks to the market on oil prices. However, that won't affect the demand for oil equipment and the services as much. So it reduces that volatility level, but still gives us exposure to the oil market. So we all know with price of oil, when COVID happened, the demand for oil dropped absolutely to rock bottom, and that was pretty much because everybody was under lockdown. Nobody was going out. There was no transportation required during those lockdowns, and so the demand was very low, and therefore the cost of storage was also very high. So if we review the demand for oil and going forward, I anticipate that to only increase, especially over 2024 and 2025, to be honest. So if we invested in this ETF just 3 years ago, we would have had around an 80% increase in our value on the ETF. So 10,000 into 18,000 US dollars. Now overall, that is great growth to see. So within the last year on this ETF, we haven't actually seen huge gains. We've only seen around a 5.4% on the last year. However, I do believe that we're going to see a lot more demand for oil going into 2024. And I think, again, having that bit of exposure to this from the oil equipment and services side is a nice touch to have. So overall, with this ETF, why would we invest in this? Well, I believe that overall the oil companies are going to be doing more exploration. That has also been backed up by what they've been saying. So there's going to be more exploration from these companies, which requires more equipment. So having that, I want to invest in the equipment that these companies are going to buy. Now, obviously we have the elections that are coming up in 2024. We have seen Trump obviously being pro-oil as well.
I don't want to drive oil prices up to $100 a barrel or $150 a barrel.
So I think with everything sort of leaning around that space, I also think that that could help from a political point of view, and it also avoids any of the shocks that we have on actual oil prices. Regardless of oil prices, as long as exploration is taking place, then that equipment is required. And that's why I think this ETF is an interesting choice for me to look at to buy within 2024. So the fourth and final ETF is actually my favorite one, and that is why I have saved it for the end. So we're going to be looking at the Defense Tech ETF known as SHIELD. SHIELD is actually a relatively new ETF listing on the markets within September 2023, with the idea to invest into military companies that are producing defense equipment. So some stats behind this ETF, we can see there's some good research that the overall defense spending annualized has increased by 4.2% on average per year since the pandemic. And obviously what I just mentioned about all of the tensions increasing, it makes complete sense for people to invest more in defense technology. And overall, the defense industry, to stay on the top of the game, especially within the US, it's all about having the latest equipment, the latest chips, the latest AI technology. And so this is what we call reimagining the defense sector. And overall, we anticipate the spending will continue to increase. And we have seen this because the government figures have been talking about how they expect expect to have large amounts of money and the biggest budgets that they've seen for a long time spending on defense technology to stay at the very top of their game. And so this makes sense for where we want to invest. And at this moment in time, defense trade is also increasing. We know that the US is supplying Ukraine with firearms. We know that the US is supplying Israel with also firearms as well. So having all this in this space with what's going on, I do not see conflict dropping within 2024, and I think having exposure to this space makes complete logical sense. So some of the stats that really back up the reason of investing in SHIELD ETF is that global defense and military spending is expected to increase 40% within 2024. That is a staggering figure, and overall we want to be a part of where that money is getting spent within those companies to overall benefit from the current markets that we have. Now, if we're looking at the growth chart here on Bloomberg, we can see that the ETF was only released within September 2023, but even still from that period to now we have seen over a 10% increase in this ETF. So overall, this is my #1 pick ETF for 2024. I think it's super exciting of what we can see. We've got hardcore facts and figures behind us of seeing exactly what's happening within the world. Confirmed military spending, global military and defense spending expected to increase by 40%, and I do not see any of the political or global tensions, should we say, decreasing dramatically within 2024, and I think all of these factors will be driving the value behind this ETF. So guys, if you've enjoyed my 4 ETFs to buy within 2024 and the reason behind them, obviously my favorite one, SHIELD, then make sure we smash that like and subscribe button. I really appreciate it, and it'll help the YouTube algo.